The dust-laden wind carried the sound of the auctioneer's gavel across the town square of Redemption, Colorado, as Willow Norton stood on the wooden platform with tears streaming down her face, her wrists bound and her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. Just 3 days ago, she had been at her father's deathbed, holding his weathered hand as he drew his final breath. Now, she was being sold to the highest bidder to cover her late father's mysterious debts that had appeared after his passing. It was 1875, and the West was still wild and untamed, a place where a woman without protection could easily become property. At 22, Willow had never imagined such a fate for herself. Her father, Thomas Norton, had been a respected shopkeeper in town, and they had lived modestly but comfortably above the general store he owned. The store had been their livelihood, their home, and the center of their small world since her mother had died of fever when Willow was just 12. $500 for the Norton girl. Do I hear 6? The auctioneer called out, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. Most of the townspeople averted their eyes, some in shame, others in indifference. No one had stepped forward to help when Harold Finnegan, the town's lone shark and self-proclaimed businessman, had produced papers showing that Thomas Norton had borrowed substantial sums before his death papers Willow was certain were forgeries. 600, called a voice from the back of the crowd. Willow's stomach twisted as she recognized Silas Montgomery, the owner of the saloon at the edge of town. He was looking at her with eyes that made her skin crawl. She had heard rumors about how he treated the women who worked for him. The thought of becoming one of those women made her feel physically ill. 700, came another voice, deeper this time. The crowd parted and Willow saw Clayton Daniels standing tall, his hand raised slightly. The sun glinted off the silver star pinned to his vest, the deputy badge he wore with quiet pride. His chestnut hair was partially hidden beneath his wide-brimmed hat, and his eyes, the color of the summer sky, were fixed not on the auctioneer but directly on her. Clayton had come to town only a year before, taking the position of deputy under Sheriff Parker. In that time, he had developed a reputation for being fair but firm, and he was respected even by those who found themselves on the wrong side of the law. Willow knew little else about him, only that he sometimes came into her father's store for supplies and always tipped his hat politely in her direction. 700 from Deputy Daniels, the auctioneer announced. Do I hear 8? 800, Silas countered quickly, a smug smile crossing his lips. 900, Clayton responded without hesitation, Willow's heart hammered in her chest. What was happening? Why was the deputy bidding on her? The questions swirled in her mind as the bidding continued to rise. $1,000, Silas shouted, his face reddening with anger. There was a collective gasp from the crowd. $1,000 was more money than most people in Redemption would see in a year. Clayton stepped forward, his spurs jingling softly against the packed earth. 1,200, he said evenly. Silas glared at Clayton, his jaw working as he calculated whether to continue. After a tense moment, he spat on the ground and turned away, muttering curses under his breath. Sold to Deputy Daniels for $1,200. The auctioneer declared, bringing down his gavel with a definitive crack that seemed to seal Willow's fate. Harold Finnegan stepped forward, a satisfied smile on his face as Clayton handed over the money, most of his life's savings, though Willow couldn't know that. Finnegan counted the bills twice, before nodding and instructing one of his men to untie Willow's wrists. As soon as she was free, Willow wrapped her arms around herself, feeling vulnerable and exposed under the gaze of the dispersing crowd. Clayton approached slowly as if worried he might frighten her. "Miss Norton," he said, removing his hat, "I'd like to take you somewhere private where we can talk." Willow nodded numbly, not seeing much choice in the matter. She followed Clayton away from the square, acutely aware of the whispers that followed them. They walked in silence until they reached the sheriff's office, a small but sturdy building at the end of the main street. Inside, the office was cool and quiet compared to the heat and noise of the town square. Sheriff Parker was out on his rounds, leaving them alone. Clayton gestured for Willow to take a seat before settling into his own chair behind a simple wooden desk. I imagine you're wondering why I did what I did back there, Clayton said, placing his hat on the desk. Willow looked at him directly for the first time. I'm assuming you want something from me, Deputy Daniels. Men always do. Clayton's expression softened. No, Miss Norton. I don't want anything from you. Your father was a good man, one of the few in this town who treated me with respect when I first arrived. Before he died, he asked me to look after you if anything happened to him. He said you were what he loved most in this world. Willow's eyes filled with fresh tears. That sounded like her father, always concerned for her welfare above his own. So you bought me out of some sense of obligation. I bought you to protect you, Clayton clarified. What Finnegan did was wrong, but he has too many powerful friends for me to stop it legally. This was the only way I could ensure your safety. And what happens now? Willow asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Am I your property? Clayton shook his head firmly. No. You're a free woman, Miss Norton. I'll have the papers drawn up to prove it. The money I paid was not to own you, but to free you from Finnegan's schemes. Willow was stunned into silence. After a moment, she found her voice again. I can't accept such charity, Deputy. That was a fortune you paid. It wasn't charity, Clayton said. It was a promise I made to a man I respected. He paused, considering his next words carefully. Your father also told me about a hidden cache of money he kept in case of emergencies. He said it was beneath the third floorboard from the back wall in the storeroom. Willow's eyes widened. I had no idea. He wanted to make sure you would always be provided for, Clayton explained. If it's still there, it should be more than enough for you to start a new life somewhere else, somewhere Finnegan and his kind can't reach you. The realization of what Clayton had done began to sink in. He had not only saved her from a life of servitude or worse, but had also given her a chance at a fresh start. Gratitude welled up inside her. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. But where am I supposed to go until then? Finnegan will have already taken possession of the store and our home. Clayton hesitated before answering. I have a small cabin just outside of town. It's nothing fancy, but you'd be welcome to stay there while we sort this out. I can make arrangements to sleep here at the office. Willow considered her options, which were admittedly few. She had no relatives to turn to, and most of the townspeople had shown today that they wouldn't stand up to Finnegan. Clayton Daniels, a man she barely knew, was offering her safety and shelter without asking anything in return. I accept your offer, Deputy, she said finally, but I insist on finding a way to repay you for everything you've done. Clayton smiled, a genuine expression that reached his eyes. Let's start by getting you settled at the cabin. We can figure out the rest later. As they left the sheriff's office, Willow felt a strange mixture of fear and hope. Her life had been turned upside down in the span of 3 days, but perhaps this unexpected turn of events was leading her toward something better than what she had left behind. The cabin was situated on a small rise about a half-mile from town, nestled among a cluster of pine trees that provided shade and privacy. It was indeed small, as Clayton had warned, but it was clean and well-maintained. A single room served as both living area and kitchen, with a curtained-off space in one corner that Willow assumed was for sleeping. It's not much, Clayton said as he lit a lamp, the warm glow illuminating the simple but comfortable furnishings. But it's secure. No one knows I own this place except Sheriff Parker. Willow walked slowly around the room, taking in her temporary home. A stone fireplace dominated one wall with a cooking pot hanging from an iron hook. A table with 2 chairs stood in the center, and shelves lined another wall, holding books, tinned goods, and various necessities. It's perfect, she said, and meant it. After the events of the day, this quiet, secluded cabin felt like a sanctuary. Thank you again, Deputy Daniels. Clayton, he corrected her gently. If we're to be neighbors of sorts, even temporarily, I think we can dispense with formalities. Clayton, Willow repeated, testing the name on her lips. And I'm Willow. He nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Willow it is. He moved toward the door. I've left some food in the cupboards and there's a well around back for water. I'll come by tomorrow to check on you and see about retrieving your father's emergency fund. Before he could leave, Willow stepped forward. Wait. You're giving me your home and sleeping in an office chair because of a promise you made to my father. I don't know how to thank you. Clayton turned back to face her, his expression serious. Your father was kind to me when others weren't. In this part of the world, kindness is rare enough to be worth honoring. He paused, then added, Get some rest, Willow. You've had a difficult day. With that, he tipped his hat and was gone, leaving Willow alone with her thoughts in the quiet cabin. She sank into one of the chairs at the table, finally allowing herself to process everything that had happened. Her father was gone, her home was gone, and yet somehow she had found an unexpected ally in Clayton Daniels. As exhaustion overtook her, Willow made her way to the curtained sleeping area. The bed was neatly made with simple but clean linens. She lay down fully clothed, too tired to undress, and within moments she had fallen into a deep, dreamless sleep. The following morning, Willow woke to the sound of birds chirping outside the cabin window. For a brief, blissful moment, she forgot the events of the previous day, imagining herself back in her room above the general store. Then reality came rushing back, and a wave of grief washed over her. She sat up, pushing back the curtain to see sunlight streaming through the small windows of the cabin. It was later than she usually woke, but after the emotional exhaustion of yesterday, her body had needed the rest. Willow found a wash basin and pitcher on a small stand in the corner. She poured water into the basin and splashed her face, then used a small mirror hanging on the wall to tidy her honey-brown hair, which had come loose from its pins during the night. A knock at the door startled her. Willow, it's Clayton. I've brought some things from town. She hurried to the door and opened it to find Clayton standing there with a cloth-covered basket in one hand and a small trunk in the other. His horse, a sturdy chestnut gelding, was hitched to a post nearby. Good morning, she said, stepping back to let him enter. Clayton set the basket on the table and the trunk beside it. I thought you might need some essentials. Mrs. Baker at the boarding house put together some clothing items for you. He gestured to the trunk. And I've brought breakfast from the cafe. Willow was touched by his thoughtfulness. That's very kind. Won't you join me? They sat at the table, and Clayton uncovered the basket to reveal fresh bread, preserves, and 2 tin cups of still warm coffee. As they ate, Clayton updated her on his early morning activities. I went to your father's store at dawn, before Finnegan's men would be about, he said. I found the floorboard your father mentioned. He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch, placing it on the table between them. This was there, along with this letter addressed to you. Willow took the pouch with trembling hands, opening it to find gold coins and several banknotes. It was more money than she had ever seen at once. The letter was written in her father's familiar, careful handwriting. My dearest Willow, if you are reading this, then I am no longer with you, and you have found my emergency fund with Deputy Daniels' help. I have known for some time that my heart was failing, though I kept this from you to spare you worry. You are the greatest joy of my life and what I love most in this world. I entrust your safety to Clayton Daniels, a man of honor and integrity. Trust him as I have. This money is yours to use as you see fit. Perhaps you will want to leave redemption and start anew elsewhere, or perhaps you will find reason to stay. Follow your heart, my dear daughter, and know that I will always be watching over you. With eternal love, your father. Tears rolled down Willow's cheeks as she finished reading. She handed the letter to Clayton, who read it silently before returning it to her. He knew he was dying, she whispered, and he never told me. He didn't want to burden you, Clayton said gently. He spoke to me about 2 months ago, said his doctor had given him 6 months at most. He made me promise then that I would look out for you if anything happened. Willow wiped her tears with the back of her hand. You knew him better than I realized, Clayton nodded. We spoke often when I would stop by the store. He was proud of you, Willow. He talked about you constantly, how smart you were, how you helped run the store, how you had your mother's kind heart and quick mind. A small smile formed on Willow's lips despite her sadness. He always did talk too much about me to anyone who would listen. She looked down at the money, then back at Clayton. This changes things. I can pay you back now for what you spent yesterday. Clayton shook his head firmly. That money is for your future, not to repay debts that don't exist. I didn't help you expecting anything in return. Before Willow could argue, there was a loud knock at the door. Clayton immediately tensed, rising from his chair and moving his hand to rest on the revolver at his hip. Stay here, he whispered to Willow, moving cautiously to the door. "Who's there?" He called out. "It's Sheriff Parker," came the reply. "Open up, Clayton. We need to talk." Clayton relaxed slightly but still appeared cautious as he opened the door. Sheriff Parker was a tall man with a thick gray mustache and weathered features that spoke of years spent in the harsh western sun. "Sheriff," Clayton greeted him, stepping aside to let him enter. Sheriff Parker nodded to Willow before turning his attention to Clayton. "We've got trouble, Deputy. Harold Finnegan is raising a stink in town, claiming you stole something that belonged to him." His eyes flicked briefly to Willow. "Says you had no right to take Miss Norton after paying for her, that you're planning to resell her for profit in the next county over." Clayton's jaw tightened. "That's ridiculous. I freed Miss Norton as soon as that farce of an auction was over." "I know that," Sheriff Parker said with a sigh. "But Finnegan's got the mayor's ear, and he's demanding that either Miss Norton be returned to him or you pay an additional sum for business interference. He's claiming the auction wasn't complete because you didn't sign the ownership papers." "There were no papers to sign because she's not property," Clayton said, his voice rising with anger. "Finnegan fabricated debts that Thomas Norton never had, then used them as an excuse to sell his daughter. It's despicable." Willow spoke up, her voice stronger than she expected. "Sheriff, my father never mentioned any debts to me. He was careful with money and kept detailed records of the store's finances. The debts Finnegan claims existed appeared only after my father died." Sheriff Parker rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "I suspected as much. Finnegan's pulled similar schemes before, but no one's been willing to stand against him." He turned to Clayton. "The problem is, he's got half the town believing his side of the story, and with Judge Wilson out of town for another 2 weeks, we can't get this settled legally right away." "What are you suggesting?" Clayton asked. "I'm suggesting you both lie low for a while," the sheriff replied. "At least until I can gather enough evidence to counter Finnegan's claims or until Judge Wilson returns. Finnegan's men were asking around town about you this morning, Clayton. It might not be safe for either of you in redemption right now." Willow felt a chill run down her spine. The situation was worse than she had thought. Not only had she lost her father and her home, but now she was in danger simply for being free. "I know a place," Clayton said after a moment of thought. "My cousin has a ranch about 3 days' ride from here near Crested Butte. We could go there until things settle down." Sheriff Parker nodded. "That sounds like the safest option. I'd advise you to leave as soon as possible, tonight if you can. I'll do what I can here to gather evidence against Finnegan in the meantime." After the sheriff left, Willow and Clayton sat in silence, both processing this new development. Finally, Willow spoke. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "You've already risked enough for me. I could take some of my father's money and leave on my own, go somewhere Finnegan won't find me." Clayton looked at her, his blue eyes serious. "A woman traveling alone would be vulnerable. Besides, I made a promise to your father and I intend to keep it." He stood up, his decision made. "We'll leave after nightfall. Pack only what you need. We'll have to travel light." As Willow prepared for their journey, gathering the few items Mrs. Baker had provided and the precious letter from her father, she couldn't help but marvel at the strange turn her life had taken. 3 days ago, she had been a shopkeeper's daughter with a simple, predictable future. Now she was preparing to flee town with a deputy she barely knew, running from a man who claimed to own her. Yet amidst the fear and uncertainty, there was a flicker of something else, something that felt strangely like the beginning of hope. Night had fallen by the time they were ready to depart. Clayton had returned to the cabin after dark with 2 horses, his own chestnut gelding and a dappled gray mare for Willow. "Her name is Storm," Clayton said as he helped Willow mount. "She's steady and sure-footed, perfect for the mountain trails we'll be taking." Willow stroked the mare's neck, feeling a connection with the gentle animal. "She's beautiful." They set out under the cover of darkness, leaving the lights of redemption behind them. Clayton led them on a winding path through the foothills, avoiding the main trails where they might be spotted. The moon was nearly full, providing enough light to see by without needing lanterns that might draw attention. After several hours of riding, when they were well away from town, Clayton finally slowed their pace. "We should be safe to rest for a bit," he said, guiding them toward a small clearing beside a stream. "The horses need water and we should eat something too." They dismounted, and Clayton tended to the horses while Willow unpacked some of the food they had brought: jerky, hard bread, and dried fruit. It was a simple meal, but after the tension of their escape, it tasted wonderful. As they sat side by side on a fallen log, eating in companionable silence, Willow studied Clayton's profile in the moonlight. There was something comforting about his steady presence, a sense that he was exactly who he appeared to be: a man of honor and integrity, as her father had written. "Tell me about your cousin's ranch," she said, breaking the silence. "What's it like there?" Clayton smiled, his expression softening. "It's beautiful country. Curtis, that's my cousin, has a spread of about 500 acres in a valley with mountains on 3 sides. He raises cattle and horses, and his wife Rachel keeps a garden that produces the sweetest corn and tomatoes you've ever tasted." He paused, taking a sip from his canteen. "They have 2 children, a boy and a girl, both under 10, good kids. It's a peaceful place." "It sounds lovely," Willow said, trying to picture it in her mind. "How long have they been there?" "Curtis moved west about 10 years ago after the war. He was in the Union Army, came back changed like many did. He couldn't settle back into our hometown in Missouri, so he headed west to start fresh." Clayton looked up at the star-filled sky. "I followed a few years later. Worked as a ranch hand for a while, then tried my hand at mining, but that wasn't for me. Ended up with the badge almost by accident when the previous deputy in redemption was killed in a bank robbery." Willow was surprised by how easily he shared his past with her. It made her feel less like a burden and more like a companion. "And your parents, are they still in Missouri?" A shadow crossed Clayton's face. "They both passed on during the war. Fever took them within weeks of each other. It was just me and Curtis after that until he met Rachel." "I'm sorry," Willow said softly. "It seems we're both orphans now." Clayton nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It's a special kind of loneliness, isn't it? But you know, I've found that family isn't always about blood. Curtis and Rachel, they're my family now, and they'll welcome you too, Willow. They're good people." The way he spoke made Willow believe him. For the first time since her father's death, she felt a glimmer of belonging, a sense that perhaps she wasn't as alone as she had feared. They continued their journey at first light, making good progress through the increasingly rugged terrain. Clayton was a knowledgeable guide, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about the land they passed through. He knew which berries were safe to eat, where to find fresh water, and how to read the weather from the clouds. On the second night, they made camp in a protected hollow surrounded by aspen trees. Clayton built a small fire, just enough to cook a rabbit he had shot earlier and to provide some warmth against the mountain chill. As they sat close to the fire, Willow found herself studying Clayton more openly. In the flickering light, his features seemed both stronger and gentler than they had appeared in town. He had removed his deputy badge before they left, and without it, he seemed less like the lawman and more like simply a man, one who had risked everything to protect her. "Why did you really help me, Clayton?" she asked suddenly. "Was it truly just because of a promise to my father?" Clayton looked up from the fire, his blue eyes reflecting the flames. He was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "Your father's request gave me the reason I needed," he finally said. "But the truth is, I've noticed you for a long time, Willow. The way you helped customers in the store, always with a kind word. How you would sit with old Mrs. Jenkins on Sundays after church, listening to her stories when no one else would. The time you gave food to that family passing through town who had nothing." He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks flying upward. "In a place like Redemption, where most people are just looking out for themselves, you stood out. I couldn't stand by and watch someone like Finnegan destroy that." Willow felt her cheeks warm, and it wasn't from the fire. No one had ever seen her so clearly before, noticed the small acts of kindness she thought went unobserved. "I didn't think anyone was paying attention," she admitted. "I was," Clayton said simply. "I'm a deputy. Noticing things is part of the job." There was something in his voice, a warmth that suggested his noticing went beyond professional observation. Willow felt a flutter in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced before. The moment was interrupted by a distant howl, a wolf calling to its pack in the night. Clayton tensed, listening intently before relaxing again. "They're far off," he assured her, "but I'll keep watch tonight just to be safe. You should get some sleep." Willow nodded, wrapping herself in the blanket he had provided. As she drifted off to sleep, the last thing she saw was Clayton's silhouette against the starry sky, steady and vigilant. The third day of travel brought them into higher country, with breathtaking views of mountains stretching to the horizon. By mid-afternoon, Clayton pointed to a valley below them, where a cluster of buildings was visible beside a winding river. "That's Willow Creek Ranch," he said. Curtis named it after the trees that line the creek running through the property. Willow smiled at the coincidence of sharing her name with the ranch that would be her sanctuary. "It looks peaceful." They rode down into the valley, following a well-worn trail. As they approached the ranch house, a substantial two-story structure built of logs and stone, a man emerged onto the porch, shading his eyes against the sun. Beside him, a woman in a simple dress appeared, with two children peeking around her skirts. "Clayton." The man called out, raising his hand in greeting. "This is a surprise." Clayton smiled broadly as they drew closer. "Curtis, Rachel, hope you don't mind unexpected visitors." They dismounted in the yard, and Curtis stepped forward to clasp Clayton's hand firmly before pulling him into a brief embrace. He was taller than Clayton, with the same chestnut hair but green eyes instead of blue. Rachel, a petite woman with auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, stepped forward to greet them as well, her smile warm and welcoming. "We always have room for family," she said, her gaze moving curiously to Willow. Clayton made the introductions, explaining briefly that they needed a place to stay for a while due to trouble in redemption. Curtis seemed to understand there was more to the story, but didn't press for details in front of the children. "Emma, Matthew, why don't you show Miss Norton where to put her horse while your mother gets supper ready?" Curtis suggested to the children, who eagerly agreed, excited by the unexpected visitors. As the children led Willow toward the barn, chattering excitedly about the new foal and the kittens in the hayloft, Clayton stayed behind with Curtis and Rachel, no doubt explaining the full situation. The ranch was even more impressive up close than it had appeared from a distance. Besides the main house, there was a large barn, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, a smokehouse, and various other outbuildings. Fields of crops stretched to the west, while cattle and horses grazed in pastures to the east. It was a thriving operation, the result of years of hard work and determination. By the time Willow returned from the barn with Emma and Matthew, Rachel had prepared a hearty meal of beef stew, fresh bread, and apple pie. The dining room was cozy and welcoming, with a long wooden table that could seat at least 10 people comfortably. Curtis raised his cup in a toast. "To family and friends, both old and new," he said, nodding toward Willow. "You're welcome here for as long as you need to stay." "Thank you," Willow replied, genuinely touched by their hospitality. "I won't impose longer than necessary." "Nonsense," Rachel said firmly. "Any friend of Clayton's is welcome here. Besides, I could use another woman's help with the garden and the preserving." "The boys are useless when it comes to knowing when the peaches are just right for canning." Curtis laughed good-naturedly at this assessment. "She's not wrong. We'd probably poison the whole ranch if left in charge of the preserves." The evening passed pleasantly, with conversation flowing easily. The children were full of questions for Willow. What was the town like? Had she ever seen a real gunfight? Did she know how to ride a horse properly? And she answered them as best she could, charmed by their enthusiasm. After dinner, when the children had been sent to bed, the adults sat around the fireplace with cups of coffee. Curtis finally asked the question that had clearly been on his mind. "So, Clayton, what kind of trouble are we talking about?" "Sheriff Parker isn't one to suggest leaving town without good reason." Clayton glanced at Willow, silently asking permission to share her story. She nodded, and he recounted the events of the past few days: Thomas Norton's death, Finnegan's fraudulent claims, the auction, and the subsequent threats. Curtis's expression darkened as he listened. "Selling a woman like she's property, that's not just wrong, it's illegal. This Finnegan character sounds like he needs to be taught a lesson." All in good time, Clayton said. For now, we need to keep Willow safe until Judge Wilson returns and can review the evidence. Sheriff Parker thinks he can prove the debts were falsified, but it will take time. And you'll both stay here until it's resolved, Rachel said decisively. Willow can have the guest room upstairs, and Clayton, you know where the spare bunk is in the foreman's quarters. Later that night, as Willow settled into the comfortable guest room with its patchwork quilt and curtains that fluttered in the gentle night breeze, she reflected on how quickly her life had changed for the worse and then, unexpectedly, for the better. She had lost her father and her home, but she had gained new friends and perhaps even a new beginning. And then there was Clayton. In the short time she had known him truly, not just as the polite deputy who visited her father's store, she had come to admire his quiet strength, his unwavering sense of right and wrong, and his gentle kindness. There was something growing between them, something she wasn't ready to name but couldn't deny either. With these thoughts spinning in her mind, Willow drifted into sleep, feeling safer than she had in days. The days at Willow Creek Ranch fell into a pleasant rhythm. Willow quickly found her place, helping Rachel with household tasks and the garden, learning to make cheese from the ranch's dairy cows, and assisting with the endless work of preserving food for the coming winter. Clayton divided his time between helping Curtis with ranch work and making occasional trips into the nearest town to send telegrams to Sheriff Parker, checking on the progress against Finnegan. Each time he returned with news, Willow found herself watching the road anxiously for his approach, her heart lifting at the first sight of him. One evening, about 2 weeks after their arrival, Willow was sitting on the front porch, enjoying the coolness that came with sunset when Clayton joined her. He sat in the rocking chair beside hers, his hat in his hands. "I received a telegram from Sheriff Parker today," he said. "Judge Wilson has returned early. The sheriff presented him with evidence that Finnegan forged the debt documents apparently. He used the same paper supplier for all his forgeries, and the sheriff was able to trace it back to him." Willow's breath caught. "What does that mean for us?" "It means Finnegan is facing charges of fraud and possibly more serious crimes if other victims come forward," Clayton explained. "The judge has officially declared the auction null and void. You're legally free, Willow, with no cloud hanging over you. And your father's store and home are rightfully yours again." Relief flooded through her. "So we can go back to redemption," Clayton nodded, but there was hesitation in his expression. "Yes, we can, but I've been thinking." He paused, turning his hat in his hands. "I've enjoyed these weeks here, seeing you bloom away from the shadow of what happened. I wonder if you might consider staying a bit longer, not out of necessity but by choice." Willow studied his face in the fading light. "Are you asking me to stay for the ranch's sake or for yours?" Clayton met her gaze steadily. "For mine," he admitted. "I've grown fond of you, Willow, more than fond. I know it hasn't been long and you've been through a terrible ordeal, but I find myself thinking about you even when we're apart. Your smile, your kindness, the way you've adapted to everything that's been thrown at you with such grace." Willow felt her heart race. She had been having similar thoughts but hadn't dared to voice them. "I've been thinking about you too," she confessed. "About how you kept your promise to my father, how you've protected me without making me feel helpless. I've never met anyone like you, Clayton." He reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand gently in his. "I don't want to rush you, Willow. You've lost so much and you deserve time to heal, but I want you to know that whenever you're ready, if you ever feel the same way, I'll be here." Willow looked at their joined hands, then up at his face, seeing the sincerity in his eyes. "I think I'm already halfway there," she said softly. Clayton's smile was like sunrise after the darkest night. "Then I count myself a fortunate man indeed." From the doorway, Rachel cleared her throat discreetly. "Supper's ready, you two. Curtis is threatening to eat everything if you don't come soon." They both laughed, the moment breaking but not forgotten. As they rose to go inside, Clayton kept hold of Willow's hand, a simple gesture that felt like a promise. Over the next few days, Willow thought carefully about her future. Her father's store in Redemption was legally hers again, but the thought of returning to the town where she had been sold like property made her uneasy. Yet it was also the place where her parents were buried, where her memories of them lived in every corner of the home they had shared. One afternoon, as she was helping Rachel pick apples in the small orchard behind the house, she voiced her dilemma. "I don't know whether I should return to Redemption or start fresh somewhere else," she admitted. "The store was my father's life's work, and it feels wrong to abandon it. But every time I think about going back there, I remember standing on that auction platform with everyone watching." Rachel placed an apple in her basket before answering. "My mother used to say that homes aren't made of wood and nails, they're made of love and memories." You can honor your father's memory anywhere, Willow. The question is, where will you build your future? It was a question Willow had been asking herself more and more, especially as her feelings for Clayton deepened with each passing day. They had taken to going for walks in the evenings, talking for hours about everything and nothing, their childhoods, their hopes, their favorite books. Each conversation revealed new layers of compatibility between them, a sense of understanding that felt rare and precious. 2 days later, Clayton approached Willow as she was hanging laundry to dry in the autumn sunshine. His expression was serious, and he held an envelope in his hand. "Another telegram from Sheriff Parker," he said. "Finnegan has been arrested and charged. The judge has ordered restitution to be paid to you for the wrongful seizure of your property. And—" He hesitated. "The sheriff asks if I'll be returning to my deputy position." Willow felt a pang of anxiety. "Will you?" Clayton shook his head slowly. "I don't think so. Curtis has asked me to stay on as his foreman. His current man is moving to California, and the position would be a good one, better pay than a deputy's wage and more stability." He looked directly at Willow. "But my decision depends largely on you." "On me?" Willow asked, her heart quickening. "Yes, on you," Clayton confirmed. "Because wherever you choose to go, Willow, I want to be there too. If you decide to return to Redemption and reopen your father's store, I'll go back to being a deputy. If you want to sell the store and stay here at the ranch, I'll take Curtis's offer. And if you want to go somewhere else entirely, start completely fresh, I'll follow you there too." Willow set down the sheet she had been about to hang, overwhelmed by his declaration. "Clayton, I can't ask you to arrange your life around mine. You're not asking, I'm offering," he said simply. "I love you, Willow. I think I started falling in love with you long before all this happened, watching you in your father's store, seeing the person you are. These weeks together have only deepened those feelings." Tears sprang to Willow's eyes, not of sadness but of joy and wonder. "I love you too," she whispered. "I didn't think it was possible to find love in the midst of such chaos, but here we are." Clayton stepped closer, taking both her hands in his. "Here we are indeed. So what shall I tell Sheriff Parker?" Willow thought about Redemption, about her father's store and the life she had known there. She thought about the ranch with its welcoming family and open spaces, and she thought about Clayton, who had saved her in more ways than one. "Tell him we won't be returning to Redemption permanently," she decided. "I'll need to go back briefly to settle my father's affairs and sell the store, but then I'd like to come back here. This place already feels more like home than Redemption ever did after my father died." Clayton's face lit up with relief and happiness. "Are you sure?" Willow nodded, certainty filling her. "I'm sure. My father wanted me to follow my heart, and my heart is leading me here to this place and to you." Clayton leaned forward, hesitating just briefly before pressing his lips to hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Willow responded, her arms finding their way around his neck as the kiss deepened, becoming a promise of the future they would build together. When they finally separated, both slightly breathless, Clayton smiled down at her. "I should warn you, Curtis is going to be unbearably smug about this. He's been telling me to court you properly since the day we arrived." Willow laughed, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. "Rachel's been giving me similar advice. I think they've been matchmaking all along." "Then we shouldn't disappoint them," Clayton said, his eyes twinkling with mischief and love. In the weeks that followed, Willow and Clayton made the journey back to Redemption to tie up loose ends. The town seemed smaller somehow, less intimidating now that Finnegan was behind bars awaiting trial. With Sheriff Parker's help, Willow was able to sell her father's store to a young couple eager to start a business, and she visited her parents' graves one last time, promising to carry their love with her wherever she went. Before they left Redemption for good, Clayton took Willow to a small hill overlooking the town, where wildflowers grew in abundance despite the approaching winter. There, with the sun setting behind the mountains, he knelt on one knee and presented her with a simple but beautiful ring. "Willow Norton, I promised your father I would protect what he loved most. I never imagined that in doing so I would find what I love most as well. Will you marry me?" With happy tears streaming down her face, Willow said yes, sealing their engagement with a kiss as the first stars appeared in the evening sky. They were married the following spring at Willow Creek Ranch, with Curtis standing as Clayton's best man and Rachel as Willow's matron of honor. Emma served as flower girl, scattering wildflower petals along the path, while Matthew proudly carried the rings on a small velvet cushion. The ceremony was held under an arch of willow branches and spring blossoms, with the mountains as a majestic backdrop. Guests from the neighboring ranches attended, along with Sheriff Parker and a few friendly faces from Redemption who had made the journey to witness the union. As they exchanged vows, Willow thought of her father and how, in his final act of love, he had set in motion the events that led her to Clayton. His promise to protect what Thomas Norton loved most had evolved into a promise of a lifetime together, filled with love and respect. After the ceremony, during the celebration that followed, Curtis raised his glass for a toast. "To Clayton and Willow," he said, his voice carrying across the assembled guests. "May your love grow stronger with each passing day, and may you always find shelter in each other's hearts, just as you found shelter here at Willow Creek Ranch." "To Clayton and Willow," the guests echoed, glasses raised high. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the valley, Clayton led Willow away from the festivities to a quiet spot by the creek that gave the ranch its name. There, among the whispering willow trees, he presented her with a small wooden box. "A wedding gift," he explained as she opened it. Inside was a delicate silver locket. When Willow opened it, she found a tiny portrait of her father on one side and a small piece of paper folded into the other. Unfolding it, she read the words Clayton had written, "For Willow, my love and my life. I will always protect what your father loved most and what I now love most to you." Willow closed her hand around the locket, her heart so full it felt it might overflow. "It's perfect," she whispered, leaning into her husband's embrace. As twilight deepened into night, they returned to join their guests, stepping into a future bright with promise. The path that had brought them together had been filled with loss and struggle, but it had led them to where they were meant to be side by side, facing whatever came next together. In the years that followed, Willow and Clayton built a life at Willow Creek Ranch that exceeded all their hopes. They constructed their own home on a gentle rise overlooking the main house, a cozy cabin that grew as their family did. Their first daughter arrived a year after their wedding, followed by twin boys 2 years later. Willow used some of her inheritance to expand the ranch's operations, adding a small apple orchard that soon became known throughout the region for producing the sweetest cider. Clayton proved to be an excellent foreman, respected by the ranch hands and trusted by Curtis to make important decisions. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and the day's work was done, Willow and Clayton would often sit on their porch, watching the stars appear one by one in the vast Colorado sky. In those peaceful moments, they would sometimes speak of the strange twist of fate that had brought them together, how a promise made to a dying man had led to a love that neither of them had expected, but that both now cherished above all else. And sometimes, when the moon was full and silvered the landscape with its gentle light, Willow would touch the locket she always wore and whisper a thank you to her father for his final, greatest gift, the man who had promised to protect what he loved most, and who had kept that promise with unwavering dedication and boundless love.